Guitar players, stubborn or just straight up allergic to good ideas. I swear, no one gets in the way of guitar players more than they do. If they can pull their heads out of their own asses for 5 seconds, they might notice something. There are other instruments in the band besides just them. Yes, we all know you're a guitar god. At least that is according to your mom. And sure, you want the best sound possible. But guess what? As an engineer, so do I! But then I get genius level comments like this from some tone deaf keyboard warrior, and suddenly I feel like I'm trying to teach basic fucking physics to a pile of wet drywall.
If you're recording and you're an artist and you have your sound, the engineer is responsible to get that sound. Your sound is already defined. Do your job, Glenn!
Wow, this level of stupid is honestly kind of inspiring. I didn't think it was possible to be this wrong and still operate a keyboard. Let's see what my friend Eric T has to say about that.
Shut the fuck up.
Tell me something, Thomas. Do you think James fucking Hetfield just strolled into the studio, farted on his amp, and poof, his Master of Puppets tone magically appeared? Because the sound is in the hands? Now, if you actually believe that load of crap, congratulations, you're a gullible moron. Ring the bell, jackhole, because it's time for school. Most guitar players do not have their own sound when they walk into the studio, but oh, they think they do. After all, they spent countless hours playing in their bedroom and maybe even stumbled through a few local gigs, and now they've convinced themselves that they've unlocked the secret to ultimate tone. Except they haven't. One notable exception, Edward Van Halen. He definitely had his own sound, but let's be real, he was a once-in-a-lifetime talent. He was a modern-day Mozart. And even he didn't just wake up one day, plug in, and suddenly sound like the Van Halen we all know and love. If you think otherwise, go dig up some old Van Halen bootlegs of them covering Sugar Loaf's Don't Call Us, We'll Call You before they got signed. You can hear the beginnings of his sound, sure, but it took years of relentless gigging, honing his craft, and here's a shocker, understanding how his guitar fit into a mix before he even set foot into a pro studio. And here's the brutal truth. Ed didn't just have a sound, he had a sound that worked. He wasn't whining about the sound guy ruining my tone. He crafted something that actually translated to an audience, both live and in the studio. And that's why Van Halen sounded massive. Not because he dialed in some mystical bedroom setting on his amp, but because he built a tone that complemented the band. Meanwhile, the rest of you? Yeah, good luck with that. Every week, some clueless guitarist walks into a studio with their signature tone, but has no clue of how to actually make it work in the context of a mix. And this is where reality slaps into the face like a pissed off bouncer. Because let's be crystal fucking clear here. How it sounds in the room does not mean jack shit. Your amp could sound like the voice of Crom himself while you're standing next to it. But if the microphone hears something weak, flabby, or shrill, that is what winds up on the record. And yet, without fail, some delusional shredder will fight to the death insisting that their tone is perfect, refusing to tweak even a single knob. Why? Because they've convinced themselves that they're a living legend in the making. Newsflash! You're not! You're a complete unknown. You have no established sound. You have no audience that gives a shit. And if you stomp into a studio demanding that your tone be preserved, as if it's some kind of holy relic, guess what? You're just setting yourself up for the biggest disappointment of your life. Of course, there's always a rare case where a tone is perfect right out of the gate, but let's be real here, that's probably not you. Believe me, I'd love it if a guitar player could come in, set up his stuff, and it just sounded great right out of the box. That normally doesn't happen. Now, let's kill another stupid myth while we're at it. It's not some sound guy conspiracy that's trying to make you sound weak. No engineer is out to sabotage your tone. We both want the same thing, the best possible sound coming out of the speakers. So why are so many guitarists so violently allergic to trying something new? Are they afraid their bedroom tone is like their manhood, woefully inadequate once it's exposed to the entire world? Let's be honest, probably. So here's the deal. You either adapt, learn, and work with the engineer, or you keep crying about how your guitar just doesn't sound the same and watch your recordings turn into absolute garbage. Your call, but don't say I didn't warn you. James Hetfield had already pumped out 2 monster albums, kill them all and ride the lightning, cementing himself as one of the meanest rhythm players in the entire history of metal. Ride the Lightning in particular was a sonic sledgehammer with sheer brutality on tracks like Creeping Death and The Call of Cthulhu. Now, he could have easily sat on his ass, stuck with his formula, and told the engineers, "Just capture my sound, you mere peasants." But instead of whining about his signature tone like every other fragile ego guitar player, he did something radical. He pushed himself. Instead of clinging to his trusty Marshalls like a security blanket, he took a wild gamble on the Mesa Boogie Mark II C+, an amp that only became legendary because of him. Now, here's the thing about the 2C+, it actually kind of sucks. On paper, it should have been the ultimate metal amp. Stupid amounts of gain, a 5-band graphic EQ, and enough aggression to eviscerate a mix. But in reality, it's kind of like the power glove of guitar amps. It looks like the ultimate weapon until you actually try using it. This is not the sound I'm looking for. What the actual fuck? Where the hell is the Metallica sound? $2,000 for a Mesa Mark V, and this is what the 2C Plus mode actually does? And if you're sitting there screaming at your screen, "The sound is in the hands, Glenn," then
Shut the fuck up, baby.
because Metallica's actual engineer on Master of Puppets, Flemming Rasmussen, didn't like the sound either. Because, he had fucking ears. So to all you bedroom warriors who think that their perfect tone is untouchable, let this sink in. The studio isn't your personal shrine to mediocrity. It's a place to create something better. And Flemming, who actually knows what the hell he's doing, had a brilliant idea. Throw a parametric EQ into the amp's effects loop. Because here's the brutal truth about guitar tone. The biggest change happens when you swap your speakers. The second biggest change is the way how the distortion interacts with the EQ. If you put an EQ before distortion, you'll get a minor tweak. But if you put an EQ after distortion, now you got a wrecking ball. And this is exactly what happens when you drop an EQ into an effects loop. You're not tweaking the pickups, you're reshaping the distortion itself. For Master of Puppets, Flemming used the Aphex EQ F2, a 500 series parametric equalizer. Now, unlike a graphic EQ, a parametric lets you surgically target frequencies and dial them in with precision. Flemming sculpted that tone into one of the most ferocious sounds in metal history. Master of Puppets didn't just set the bar, it obliterated it. And Flemming even took detailed notes, which you can find online if you want to try it out for yourself. Now, here's where Hetfield deserves some credit. Instead of crying about his amp sounding wrong, he worked with his engineer to dial in something that actually sounded great. He experimented, he refined, and evolved. And that is the lesson here. Because if James Hetfield, one of the most legendary rhythm players in history, was willing to adapt, then what the fuck is your excuse? Now, before you rush off to buy this mythical EQ, let me save you some pain. Because it was used on a famous record, it is stupidly expensive and not magical. Audio engineers are kind of brain dead like that. You stick a big name album onto a piece of gear and the price inflates like the cost of a shitty apartment in LA. And unless you already own a 500 series rack, you're going to be looking at well over $1,000 just to get one of these bad boys up and running in your effects loop. So what's the prospective Metallica fan to do? The answer comes from Canada. Enter Sandman, the Puppet Master EQ pedal. Created by Master Effects in Canada, it packs everything you'd ever want into a parametric EQ pedal to get those Metallica-like tones without the ridiculous price tag of a vintage 500 series Aphex. And guess what? It's a pedal, so you won't have to lug around a 500 series rack unit like it's some relic out of an old recording studio. Oh yeah, did I mention it's only $199? Yeah, you heard me. And the best thing, it can take that 2C Plus from sounding like you set your life savings on fire to absolutely obliterating faces. Now, here's the quiet part that they're never going to say out loud. They know that most guitar players barely know how to work a tone knob, let alone a parametric EQ. So they've dumbed it down so much that even self-proclaimed experts like Thomas Ochoa might actually have a fucking clue. A traditional parametric EQ lets you select the frequency, tweak the boost and cut, and the bandwidth. But let's be real here. Expecting guitar players to figure that out is like expecting a bass player to know the song before ever walking into a studio. Yeah, that happens. So Master Effects took the guesswork out and made it so simple that even a bedroom shredder with more pedals than skill can master it. The bass knob boosts, the mid knob cuts, yes, even when you turn it up, and the treble knob boosts. That's it. Even the most tone-deaf, basement-dwelling, forum-arguing, Gibson guitar or nothing purist can't fuck this up. But oh how they will try! It's almost like Master Effects looked at this pedal and said, damn, guitar players are gonna get this wrong unless we idiot-proof it. It's the musical equivalent of child-proof locks on a minivan or those plastic covers on electrical sockets. Except instead of keeping toddlers from electrocuting themselves, it stops guitar players from absolutely murdering their tone like Metallica did to their career with Saint Anger and Lulu. And let's be honest, that's a public service. Now, I can't take credit for the sounds I'm crafting here. I gotta thank Christian Vey for lending me his Mark V so I could do this video. And then I gotta thank him again because I don't think I'd ever want to actually buy one of these overpriced lunch boxes. Seriously, this thing has more switches than a NASA control panel, and none of them make it sound good without some serious external help. But a big shout out goes out to Lamb Chopper 678, who really goes insanely in depth into crafting this kind of sound. If you haven't checked out his channel, do yourself a favor. He does a far better job of getting Metallica tones than I ever could. Meanwhile, I'm just gonna be over here making fun of gear and ruining your childhood nostalgia with cold, hard reality. Now, for all of you guys who get mad at me because I talk in terms of studio recording, let's face it, it's called Spectre Sound Studios, not Spectre Sound playing your sister's birthday party. The biggest test for me is how well it works in a mix, because that's the whole point. We're not here to sit around and admire isolated guitar tones like they're some kind of museum piece. We're here to make records that sound killer. So how does it sound by itself? Who fucking cares? How it sounds on your record. That's the part that actually fucking matters. And does it work? You tell me. Now for this mix, I used a Mesa cab from the late 90s loaded with vintage 30s. Pretty sure that there are V30s used on the Black album, so what we have here is some kind of bizarre love child between Master of Puppets and Black, which to be honest, I kinda like. I've always been a huge fan of the Black album's production, but to really nail that snare sound, I had to use a sample. Ugh, I feel so icky. Somebody throw me a towel! Master Effects has taken a concept that usually makes guitarists break out in a cold sweat and turned it into an easy-to-use pedal that will help you finally nail the tone that you've been chasing. And at only $199, it's a total no-brainer. If you're into studio recording or you're just a die-hard Metallica fanatic who insists on justice for all for your EQ settings, the Puppet Master EQ delivers the goods. Just make sure to plug it into your effects loop unless you enjoy the sound of disappointment. In that case, don't put anything into your 2C Plus's effects loop. Just keep telling yourself, I paid all this money, of course it sounds great. My only regret? That this pedal didn't exist 2 decades ago. I could have saved myself years of frustration from banging my head against my amp, which turns out does not improve your guitar tone. And EQ in the effects loop is often the missing link between meh and metal as fuck. All you have to do is to be willing to experiment. Duh! The truth is, a lot of guitar players see themselves as the next Edward Van Halen, just waiting to be discovered by a world that will be forever grateful for their existence. But the reality is, most of us will never come close to that level of inventiveness. When you walk into a studio, it's great to have a goal in mind. Just be willing to actually put in the work to achieve it. You can either evolve your tone or be the guy playing a signature sound that nobody gives a flying fuck about. Your call. And yet, without... fucking hell. Ah! And yet some just... Yeah. Now, unlike... Throw an E... The bass knob... Fuck! I was so close. Poof! He got his master... Fuck!